Okay, sound check. Sounds good. Okay. All right. Let's get started. Hashem Naaseh v'Natzliach. We're here. Tisha B'Av, once again, 1956 years after the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash, and I wanted to take this time and really discuss something that will put things into perspective, because while most Jews are looking forward to the rebuilding of the third Bet HaMikdash, as Rashi says, the third Bet HaMikdash will come down from Shamayim. There's a machloket among the Chachamim whether it'll come down complete, or whether Hashem is going to leave a few stones for us to complete it and be partners with Him in the building of the third Bet HaMikdash, just like He has us become partners with Him in the creation, where He creates the Jew with a orla in order to do the Brit Milah on the 8th day. But with all that being said, most Jews are looking forward for the Bet HaMikdash. I'm sure many of you have been watching lectures over the last 24 hours from different rabbis, or my own lectures over the past years, and I'm sure you've heard many different discussions about Sinat Chinam being the reason why the second Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. And as the Gemara in the Yerushalmi says, that every generation that the Bet HaMikdash is not built, that means that it would have been destroyed had it been there. Meaning that if you're in this world for 40 years, you've been here for 40 Tisha B'Avs, and each and every year that passed, you were part of a generation, we were part of a generation where the Bet HaMikdash would have been destroyed had it been here. So, of course, we could all say it's Sinat Chinam, it's baseless hatred. People say all types of bad things about each other, disclose secrets to the public, doing things that are inappropriate. And of course, that is all forbidden, but we have to look at the words of the sages to really understand, why isn't the Bet HaMikdash being rebuilt? What's holding it back? After nearly 2,000 years of not having a Bet HaMikdash, it's pretty clear that something is holding it back. And instead of just simply putting it on a general term of Sinat Chinam, we have to look deeper into the words of the sages to see if we can narrow it down to something that happened, something that's happening that can put things into perspective. Perhaps it'll give us a better chance of not having another Tisha B'Av like we had this year. Now, the Chachamim are full of insights about the times of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. Some of the most horrific things in all of history happened during this time. And of course, we have the sages always wanted to make sure that we remember where we were, what happened to us, why it happened to us. And therefore, it behooves us to really look into their words and see what we can actually apply to our lives today. Now, in the worlds of the Gentiles, this is not necessarily such a popular thing, as noted in a sefer called Mekor Baruch by Rav Baruch Epstein. In Chelik Bet, page 115, there's a story of what happened after the Holocaust. In 1948, when Rabbi Weiss of Vilna says that the Hungarian rabbis came to place a request in front of the leader of Austria at the time, this Franz Josef, Caesar Franz Josef. This Gentile leader was favorable to the Jews, and was known to care for the Jews and did good things for them. So they took this opportunity after the demise of nearly 35% of the Jewish people in the world in a very short period of time by Amalek, the Nazis. They wanted to make sure that the Jewish people remember this and commemorate this. And they asked Franz Josef if they could have a national mourning day. Because it wasn't just the Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, it was also the Gentiles. Tens of millions of Gentiles were killed in the Holocaust. And to their surprise, Franz Josef denied their request and said, no, this is going to make people depressed. They're going to think about how they lost their homes when Hungary was taken over, and how they lost their family members, and it's going to make people depressed. We're not going to have it. Now, of course, the Jews were disappointed, but there was not much that they can do. They had placed a request, and the request was denied. As time went on, these same Hungarian Jews who had a good working relationship with Franz Josef, they came back to him and they said, what's the reason behind it that you said, no, we understand that you said depressed and everything, but at the same token, there is a international acknowledgement of the 9th of Av, destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, that all countries are aware of, that the Jews are mourning the destruction of their Bet HaMikdash, and everyone acknowledges it and and accepts it. So what's different about this? And Franz Josef said something very, very interesting. He said, listen, if we pass 1800 years after the Holocaust, then we'll do a memorial for that too. Meaning that in his eyes, if the pain is fresh, the pain is something that just happened, we don't want to remind people of it. But if the pain is old, like what you Jews have, you can memorize it, you can memorialize it, think about it, do whatever you want. It's not going to affect anybody today. Now, of course, this is right and wrong. It's right that you don't want to necessarily remind somebody that's hurting of something that just happened to them. But at the same token, if you don't remember where you were, as if you're there as a Jew, then it's meaningless. So really the key is to understand that when we have a Tisha B'Av, we're supposed to feel as if the Bet HaMikdash is being destroyed as we speak. That's ideally what we're supposed to get to. Now, of course, this is not necessarily something that everyone can achieve right away. You have to work on yourself, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we all succeed in doing such a thing. But the key difference here is we see the mentality of the Gentiles is very different from the Jews. We want to memorialize our pain as if it's happening right now, because this is our tradition, this is our masoret, this is who we are. If we don't remember the pain of the past, we're not going to fix it today. We're going to disconnect from it. But in the world of the Gentiles, they just want to live for today. They have this world. They want to enjoy this world. They don't want to necessarily live any pain. You want to remember something from 2,000 years ago, that's your choice. But don't cause us to lose the taste of sweetness that we have in our lives. Now, if this was only in the world of the Gentiles, it really wouldn't be worth mentioning, especially not in such an important sefer as Mekor Baruch. But one of the things that happened at the time is that the Maskilim, the Enlightenment movement, all of these reformers that have turned the Jewish world upside down over the last couple of years, took advantage of this situation and decided that they're going to remove the whole concept of mourning for Tisha B'Av from their version of Judaism. Remove it altogether. They removed it from the Sidurim, they removed it from their Keilot, they removed it altogether, and literally they wanted to even outlaw it. Outlaw mourning for the Bet HaMikdash. And this is what happens when a Jew starts thinking like a non-Jew. Now, one of the things that all of us have learned is that at one point or another, the third Bet HaMikdash is going to be built. Be'ezrat Hashem, we merit to see it. We merit to live during that time when Mashiach comes. But with all of hopes and dreams aside, we have to really ask ourselves, why isn't it being done right now? Why isn't Hashem convinced yet that we are worthy to have the third Bet HaMikdash? Because if you look at what happened at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, you're astounded at how we lost this. And these are some of the things that I want to go through with you. Words of the Midrash and some of the Chachamim that are really going to give us some perspective. Now, of course, everyone knows that Jeremiah the prophet was there warning Am Yisrael. Isaiah the prophet first warned Am Yisrael and told them that if you don't heed my words, don't heed my warnings, you're going to end up having to listen to the Anatot. Who's the Anatot? Says the Midrash, the Anatot was Jeremiah, because he was from a place called Anatot. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the Kohanim, who were the Anatot. And Jeremiah warned Am Yisrael time and time again to do Teshuva, to stop their evil ways, or else they're going to suffer the worst possible pain that you could ever imagine. But Am Yisrael was not convinced. And the Midrash Rabbah, it brings us some of the things that happened. The Midrash Rabbah in the Psikta, the beginning of it, the introduction to it, it's a whole section. It's not really a beginning like you have in other books where it's a preface is 1, 2, or 3 pages. The Psikta is quite long. It could be a sefer in itself. But these are the introductions that the sages made in order to give a perspective that the Bet HaMikdash's destruction was not some happenstance, was not something that was bad luck, was not something that was not divinely executed as a result of our actions. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana opened a discourse and tells us that if you ever see these places that are these Jewish communities or former Jewish communities empty of Jews, look at the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who said that the reason why they were plucked out of their location, why they were either killed or exiled or anything else, is because those people did not support the wages of the teachers of Torah, the teachers of Mishnah. Not only did they not have their kids learning in yeshivot, but they didn't even support the rabbis that are teaching it, even when they wanted to teach them in their home or in small places. For this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu used as one of the pretexts to destroy the Bet HaMikdash. Why is this the case? Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, they forsook but me they forsook, my Torah they did not keep. The prophet Jeremiah in chapter 16 verse 11 is telling us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is crying out because they left him and they didn't keep the Torah. But the Chachamim ask a question, well, of course, if they left you, certainly they're not keeping Torah. Why what seems like a superfluous statement? Because if they would have stayed learning Torah, even if they didn't believe in me, even if they didn't like me, if they would have continued learning Torah, they would have eventually done Teshuva. They would have eventually come back to me. So when they did not support the Torah, when they preferred to invest into more material, into more of this temporary world, rather than invest into the Torah, then what ended up happening is that they did not learn the Torah that's necessary to bring them back home. And if there's no way for them to come back home, if there's no way for them to come back to Hashem, to do Teshuva, then the world loses its right to exist. And that's why the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga says that when Jeremiah went from place to place to see if anybody is teaching people Torah that's going to get them to do Teshuva, and he couldn't find anyone, he started crying out hysterically, saying, Anshe Emunah Avadu. We lost the men of faith. We lost the men that will teach people how to do Teshuva. But do Teshuva from what? From not supporting the Torah? Why not just get a few millionaires, or even 1 millionaire, to start a little, start a yeshiva and go from there? That's the question that a person should be asking. There was a reason behind why Am Yisrael got to a point where a large portion of them started hating the Torah. But how do you get to such a point? How do you get to such a point where you hate the Torah? Become anti-Torah? The Midrash continues and says that if you, the Jewish people, have thrown the words of Torah to the ground, then immediately the wicked kingdom becomes successful against you. And that's why the prophet Daniel says, and it will achieve and succeed. Meaning that we see that the outcome of us abandoning the Torah in the past, in the time of the first Bet HaMikdash, didn't end up so well. So certainly we shouldn't follow. If you're so smart, if you have such high IQs, you would learn from history. But we didn't. How is it possible that a nation that has more geniuses throughout history than all of the other nations combined, as you can see even in our current generation, in our current world that we live in, where they appreciate the Nobel Prize winners. If you calculate the per capita Nobel Prize winners that are Jewish versus the non-Jews, there's no comparison. There's many more Jews per capita that have won Nobel Prize than any of the other nations. So with such intellect, with such geniuses, you would think that you learn from your history. You saw that when you abandoned the Torah during the time of the first Bet HaMikdash, or when you abandoned the Torah from the years before that, even at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, where we literally looked right or left instead of looking straight at Moshe Rabbeinu, instead of listening to his words, or at the time of Yeshua ben Nun, where the Malach was sent to rebuke Yeshua ben Nun, because even though they were during a war, Hashem still expected them to learn Torah. And if not, the angel himself was sent to kill them. So you have this in your history, and you're clever people. Why didn't you learn from it? Why didn't we learn from it? Why aren't we learning from it now? This is the big question we have to ask, and Be'ezrat Hashem answer. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, there have never risen wise men among the non-Jewish nations of the world like Bil'am the son of Beor and Avnimus Agardi. Avnimus Agardi was at the time of Rabbi Meir Baal Nes, it was actually a non-Jewish acquaintance of Rabbi Meir Baal Nes. And he was a Greek philosopher, extraordinary genius. And these people, although they were Gentiles, although they were not exactly the most righteous, especially, Bilam obviously being the biggest Rasha in history, they knew the Jewish secret more than the Jews knew. Where the nations came to these savants, says the Midrash, and asked them, obviously this is at different times. One is the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, one is 1500 years later. will we be successful in engaging this nation, meaning going to war with them? And they both said to the nations, go around to the synagogues, and if you find that children are vocally chirping in the Torah study, then you will not be successful against them. But if you don't see them learning Torah, these kids, then you will be successful against them. Here, Bil'am HaRasha and Avnimus HaGardi both say the same thing. If you see the Jews learning Torah, don't mess with them. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu made sure that there is a decree that came through the words of their forefather Yitzchak. Akol kol Yaakov v'yadayim yedei Esav. The voice is the voice of Yaakov and the hands are the hands of Esav. And the Midrash says that if you hear the call of Yaakov, the voice of Yaakov, meaning the kids learning Torah, then the power of Yaakov is going to overwhelm the world. Everyone will be scared of them because of the holiness that's within them through the Torah. But if you don't hear the call of Yaakov, then the second decree comes through, which is Yadayim Yedei Esav. Then the hands of Esav become effective. Then the hands of Esav can hurt, Chas v'Shalom, Yaakov. So we see here another issue. The smartest people in history, the chosen people, don't know what their Gentiles know. How could that be? How is it that we didn't learn from history? We didn't learn from our sages. And even the leaders among the Gentiles knew. This is your secret weapon. It's not the Iron Dome. It's not politics. It's not money. It's your Torah. And you're smart enough to read. So read. This is the history. In the fourth section of the Psichta, Rabbi Abahu brings up the teachings where it says, the Holy One, blessed is He, said, I brought Adam, the first man, into the Garden of Eden, and I commanded him, and he transgressed my commandment. And I lamented over him. How? As it says, Hashem God called out to the man, meaning to Adam HaRishon, and said to him, where are you? Ayeka. Meaning that this is not the first time things didn't go in the ideal fashion. But this, Chazal is comparing, is that just like Adam HaRishon did not do what he was supposed to do, did not do the will of Hashem, and got kicked out, the children of Hashem, the descendants of Adam, also were commanded by HaKadosh Baruch Hu not to make certain sins, not to desecrate the Torah, not to abandon the Torah. And when they violated that, they also got kicked out. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Nehemiah said in the name of Rabbi Achu that there was a time where it became apparent that danger is upon them. Nebuchadnezzar was threatening to come. Now, for those who do not know, the Midrash here spends several sections talking about how the 12 tribes were not all exiled out of Israel all at once, but rather 2 tribes at a time. First, there was the tribe of Reuven and Gad, and half of the tribe of Menashe. And Chachamim say that they were more inclined to make sins because they chose already at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu that they were going to live not go enter the Eretz Yisrael. So they lived in a section that the Jews conquered, and they were further from the Beit HaMikdash. They were further from everybody else, and therefore more likely to sin, and they were exiled first. After them, two more tribes followed, the tribe of Issachar and Naphtali. Things weren't looking so good. In fact, after 10 tribes were exiled and only 2 remained, the tribe of Yehuda and Benjamin, the 10 tribes started complaining. Maybe there's favoritism in heaven. That just like Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'll rebuild the nation from you, let me destroy the rest of them. Perhaps Hashem chose to let me rebuild the nation with Yehuda and Benjamin. And the 10 that were exiled and became slaves and gladiators and all types of other horrible things and killed, perhaps Hashem is getting rid of us. Maybe there's favoritism. But then the Midrash says, no. Shortly thereafter, the tribes of Yehuda and Benjamin were exiled as well. But this actually gave hope to everyone. Why did it give them hope? Should make them depressed. Because they realized that if Hashem is punishing all of us, that means He's not going to destroy all of us. He's delivering His wrath on the stones. Of course, millions of Jews died in the process, but we as a nation will remain. Because there is no favoritism in heaven, and the reason why the tribe of Yehuda and Benjamin were not exiled at the same time as everybody else is simply because their cup of sins was not full yet, like the rest of the tribes, to deserve getting exiled. They still had that chance to do Teshuva, but unfortunately they did not either. But this actually gave everyone hope. As strange as it may sound. But Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Nehemiah want to bring the teachings of Rav Acha, of what are some of the reasons, the rationale behind not doing Teshuva. Why didn't you do Teshuva? The Chachamim say, because all of the people of Israel would say, Nebuchadnezzar has already gathered all the money in the world. What does he need our money for? They thought maybe the apparent danger coming is because of money. They said he's already rich. What does he need our money? Even though we have money, he already has the rest of the world's money. He has much more money. They were led to believe that perhaps this is political. Perhaps this is financial. It's not divine. It's not because we abandon the Torah. Even though the prophet is telling us it's the Torah. Nah, prophet, he's an old-timer. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's too harsh. He's not up with the times. He's not modern enough. We think it's because of money. And if it's money, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't want anything with us. He already has enough money. The Midrash says that on that type of thought, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them a special rebuke and said the Holy One, blessed is He, I swear by your lives that I shall make your money as dear to Nebuchadnezzar as the spices that are brought up upon the table at the meal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, although he has a lot of money, and he doesn't need your money, that's not the reason why you're getting this rebuke. That's not the reason why you are facing a destruction. But just because you said that, I'll make one of the reasons of why he desires you, why he desires to destroy you, enslave you, torment you, the money. With all of the money that he has, suddenly he'll feel lacking. He has $100 trillion, but he now will desire the few billion that you have, as if he doesn't have anything. Like Haman, who was a multi-billionaire, but said to his wife that he feels like he has nothing so long as the Jews are alive, so long as Mordechai is alive. So Hashem said, you think it's money? I'll make it about money. But that's just one of the reasons, because the real reason is the Torah. But it's just that you haven't invested into the Torah. You haven't supported the Kollel. You haven't supported Kiruv. You haven't learned Torah yourself. So how would you know? But still we do not have an answer of why they keep making the same mistake. Why do they keep making the same mistake? At another time, the Midrash says that Jeremiah rebuked them and told them that they're facing a destruction if they don't do Teshuva. And they said to Jeremiah, come on, what are you talking about? Hashem would never destroy the Beit HaMikdash. Why not? He needs it. He needs the Beit HaMikdash. Who else is going to give him korbanot? Who else is going to bring him the things that he needs? This heretical thought is not only something that was taught back then, but is unfortunately still being taught today, that Hashem needs. And Hashem specifically made sure that we were slaves in Egypt before He took us out. That we were slaves in Egypt at a place of no return, a place of no hope, a place where literally the people have developed the mentality that they could no longer see themselves as anything but slaves. Making Hashem create a super miracle as part of the Exodus in order to take them out. One, to destroy the enemy, the Egyptians, and one, to invigorate the righteous among the Jews, the 20% or so of them that actually left Egypt, to actually think like a Jew, which is that there's always hope if we believe in Hashem. But of course, there are all types of people misleading them. All types of people tormenting them. If not before, then after. One of the examples the Midrash brings is that even though Nebuchadnezzar came in, other nations joined also. The old enemies of the Jews, the Ammonites and the Moabites, saw the opportunity, saw that Am Yisrael is under attack in a place where they can't defend themselves anymore. And they entered the Beit HaMikdash, going all the way to the Kodesh Kodashim. And they found the two cherubs there. And they took the two cherubs and placed them in a cage and started parading them around the streets of Yerushalayim to display to the other non-Jews who had come there to celebrate the demise of the Jews. and say, look, they're also idol worshippers. All of you said that they're not idol worshippers. Look, they worshipped these things. And the Midrash says that at that moment, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that these Ammonites and Moabites that were never allowed to convert to Judaism, but was still given the right to exist, the men among them were not allowed to convert. The women, yes, because we obviously have Ruth. Just as a side note. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw how evil they are, that they're making fun of his children, he made sure that everyone realizes that only he is allowed to rebuke his kids. And at that moment he vowed that he's going to destroy the Ammonites and the Moabites, saying, and therefore as I live, the word of Hashem, Master of Legions, God of Israel, I swear that Moab will be like Sodom, and the children of Ammon will be like Gomorrah. This is the prophet Zephaniah chapter 2 verse 9. Meaning that there is tormenting of the Jews in all ways. Before the destruction, after the destruction. But we still have to ask ourselves the big question of why did we keep making this mistake of thinking that it's something else? That perhaps God needs the Bet HaMikdash and therefore he won't destroy it. Or that maybe it's about politics, money, and therefore there's no need, we'll find us a different solution. Even after we're already seeing the Nebuchadnezzar start exiling sections of Am Yisrael. This didn't happen all at once. Meaning Hashem gave us countless chances to do tshuva. Nebuchadnezzar comes, takes out 2 of the tribes. So you realize 10 are left, the danger is still left. 2 more, because no tshuva. 8 are left, obviously the danger is still there. Do tshuva. No tshuva. 2 more, and 2 more, and 2 more. Every several years, more will come out, more destruction until everything is destroyed. Now you know that at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu himself, in the burning bush, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, I can't speak. You need someone that's charismatic, that's a good speaker to get the people out. You should take Korach. Korach is a fantastic speaker. And he's smart. Why not choose him? Hashem says, no, Dafka, I want you. I don't want a good speaker that's good with words. I want someone that's going to follow me. Later on, Korach himself sees that he is going to be the forefather or the grandfather of Shmuel HaNavi. And this leads him to go against Moshe Rabbeinu, thinking that if I'm the one that's going to be the father of Shmuel, such a righteous person, then certainly I'm more righteous than Moshe Rabbeinu. He went against Moshe Rabbeinu, and obviously the Torah says that Korach and everyone that followed him are in Gehenom until this day. So we see that when someone went against Moshe Rabbeinu, went against the Torah, it didn't end well for them. We saw it. And the generation of the destruction also saw it. As the Gemara says in Masechet Yomah, in the first Bet HaMikdash, there was a fire coming down from heaven every day in the image of a lion. In the second Bet HaMikdash, there was a fire coming from heaven in the image of a dog, because there was so much control of the Sitra Achra, the yetzer. But still, a fire is a fire. Still, obviously, Hashem was there as well. What is this Bet HaMikdash that is so important that we needed only one solution, which is to follow the Torah in order for us to keep to remain in it and not have it destroyed? What was leading us astray time and time again into convoluted and manipulated conclusions that perhaps there is a different solution, that we could keep this Bet HaMikdash through money, through politics, through the conclusion that maybe God needs it? How do we get there? Rabotai Yekarim, the Midrash Rabbah brings something extraordinary and says as follows: Am Yisrael says, we were shamed, for we heard the words of disgrace. This is referencing the calamities that befell the Jewish people on the 17th of Tammuz. Embarrassment covered our faces is referring to the calamities that befell the Jewish people on the 9th of Av. For foreigners set upon the sanctuaries of Hashem's temple, is referencing the first destruction and the second destruction. First destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, second destruction. We see that from the words of the Torah, each statement, meaning each disaster, was a separate decree. The Bet HaLevi in Parashat Bo, for those of you that remember, in the series Bitachon Be'Hashem, it was all based on the teachings of the Bet HaLevi. And the Bet HaLevi in Parashat Bo opens up our eyes in a way unlike anything else. He says that the city walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz. That was the disaster. That's why we fast on the 17th of Tammuz. Now, why did Hashem choose the 17th of Tammuz? We learned a few weeks ago, and over the years, certain things happened throughout history where Am Yisrael made mistakes, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to utilize this day as a day of mourning. Example of them is that Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Mount Sinai, saw that Am Yisrael was sinning with the golden calf, and therefore broke the tablets. So the conclusion is that the sin of the golden calf was the reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the first Bet HaMikdash. Because this was a violation of the first commandment in the 10 commandments, where out of the 10 that we have, 2 of them were heard by all of Am Yisrael, where each time Hashem said the words, everyone died. Hashem resurrected them, said the second commandment, everyone died again. Hashem resurrected them, but before Hashem said the third commandment, everyone said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we can't handle this. You go speak to him alone, and whatever he says, we'll do. And then we'll figure out, we'll understand why. Na'aseh v'nishma. It was too much for them to hear the words of Hashem. But the first 2 commandments they heard. And therefore the punishment for the first 2 is the most harsh. So when Hashem says, I am the God that took you out of Egypt, and they worship the golden calf, this is a horrible thing. But since the punishment since the sin of the golden calf wasn't done by everybody, literally, rather it was by the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav is the ones that sinned with the golden calf, and everyone else was punished for it as well because they did not rebuke. They didn't put a stop to it. So they got punished as if they also worshipped the golden calf. Even though they didn't worship the golden calf, but since they stayed there without doing anything about it, they got charged for it, just like the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat says, if somebody is responsible for a family, he's responsible for their crimes. If he sees somebody in his family he has to rebuke them for going against Hashem. If he sees one of them sinning and he doesn't rebuke, he gets charged for their sin as well. If he's in charge of a family, he's responsible for the whole family. If he's in charge of a synagogue, he's responsible for every member in the synagogue. If he's responsible for an entire city, he's a head rabbi of a city, then he's charged for everybody's sins. If he's in charge for the entire world, he's the Gdol Ador of the world, he's responsible for everybody. Wherever he can rebuke, he has to rebuke. He can't sit there quietly. The bigger your responsibility, the bigger the obligation. So when Am Yisrael saw the Erev Rav sinning against Hashem with the golden calf, they were supposed to stop them. And since they didn't, Hashem punished all of them as if they all destroyed as if they all sinned and went against the Torah by worshipping this golden calf. But on the good side, since they didn't actually sin, the punishment was temporary. The destruction of the Bet HaMikdash was the first Bet HaMikdash, and Hashem allowed us to fix ourselves, to do Teshuva, and 70 years later, the second Bet HaMikdash is built. And therefore that we see that the sin of the second Bet HaMikdash is much worse. Because it's been nearly 2,000 years and we still do not have a second Bet HaMikdash. And this sin is the sin of the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, which all started, says the Bet HaLevi, with the unfavorable report of the Meraglim, the spies. 12 leaders of Am Yisrael, one for each tribe, went to the land of Israel to spy out the land. All came back, 10 of which said that it's a land that eats its own people, that even Hashem cannot defeat them. They said Lashon Hara about Hashem. They said Lashon Hara about the land. The only two righteous among them were Caleb ben Yefuneh and Yeshua ben Nun, who merited to see the land, who merited continuing to lead Am Yisrael. But the other 10, Meraglim, misled the rest of the nation to cry bitter tears about nothing, to lose emunah in Hashem, and that was decreed as the day that Am Yisrael will suffer every year. That we've suffered, it was on this day, on the 9th of Av. And this was the day that the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, the first and the second. But the reason why the second Bet HaMikdash was destroyed was because of the Meraglim. What do the Meraglim have to do with the second Bet HaMikdash? You see, the violation of the Meraglim was the violation of the second of the 10 commandments. Where the second commandment, says the Bet HaLevi, is where Hashem says directly to Am Yisrael that you shall not have any other gods before me. This is the prohibition of Avodah Zarah. This is the prohibition of believing in anything else having any power other than Hashem. Whether it's a politician, or money, or celebrity, or a boss, or anything else. This is any time you empower anything other than Hashem, it's a violation of the second commandment. And when the Meraglim said that Hashem cannot defeat the giants that live in Israel, in essence, they empowered the giants. Now this is understandable for why the Meraglim got punished. But why the Bet HaMikdash? Because the same sin was repeated at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, where the Bet Levi says, these same two sins were implicated in the destruction of the two temples. The first temple was destroyed because of the sin of Avodah Zarah, and the second temple, however, was destroyed because of the rise of heretical sects, such as the Sadducees, who gave credence to their own interpretation of the Torah. Through their attacks on the teachings of the rabbis and the tradition from Mount Sinai, they undermined Am Yisrael's emunah in Hashem and brought about the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. And although the Gemara in Masechet Yoma attributes the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash to Sinat Chinam, where it's baseless hatred of one Jew for another, it was in fact such hatred that led to the success of the heretical sects. Through baseless hatred towards the rabbis that speak the truth, Am Yisrael was distanced from their leaders and their teachers, and thus they fell prey to the wicked views of the heretics. This is the meaning of our Midrash. Rabotai Yekarim, the Bet Levi and the Midrash uncover our eyes to understand what is the real meaning of Sinat Chinam. Sinat Chinam, Rabotai Yekarim, says Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz, that when you see somebody sitting on a road and putting himself in danger, where a vehicle is coming their way and you don't say anything, you must hate this person a lot for not warning him. The same thing goes when you don't rebuke somebody else. And what ended up happening, Rabotai Yekarim, is that when Am Yisrael did not feel like it's their job to speak the truth, to support the truth, to support Torah, this gave the heretics the opportunity, the window of opportunity to enter Am Yisrael and start teaching all types of heretics, such as perhaps the Nebuchadnezzar is not going to come because he already has enough money. Perhaps the Nebuchadnezzar is not going to come because God needs this Bet HaMikdash. God needs you. And the heretics were not silenced. No one would fight against them. And so long as the heretics were allowed to keep speaking, for so long as the heretics did not have someone going against them to silence them, to at least tell people what the truth is, the heretics continued to flourish. So it started with Sinat Chinam, but the outcome was the heretics. And the heretics teaching Am Yisrael not to support the Torah, not to support yeshivot, not to support avrechim, not to learn the truth of the sages, not to stay true to the Masoret, not to fear God. There's no punishment. Everyone deserves only good. God will say, I'm sorry to you. And all types of heretical teachings that are unfortunately still alive today by Rishaim that we've spoken about time and time again, like Manis Friedman and the rest of his followers and supporters, especially the rabbis among them, or those that call themselves rabbis, I should say. When there's not enough fight against the heretics, that means that had we had the Bet HaMikdash, now it would be destroyed again. Here we see clearly from the words of the Torah the reason why we lost the Bet HaMikdash is the same reason of why we don't have it today. And rather than just pinpoint it on a general terminology called Sinat Chinam, we used the holy words of the sages to understand what the meaning is and understand once and for all. Sinat Chinam results with heretics that teach things that are against the Torah. And so long as we don't fight against the heretics, We don't deserve the Bet HaMikdash. You say, yeah, but some people fight. Jeremiah fought. You're right. Jeremiah, Isaiah, Zephaniah, Zechariah. Sure, there were prophets that spoke the truth and warned the people. But obviously, that's not enough. Hashem wants more than just the prophets to warn the people. He wants the people to warn the people. He wants all of Am Yisrael to fight against the heretics. Not just one person or two people, but every single one of us has to be able to fight against the heretics. Not by going to speak with them or by violence, chas v'shalom. Rather, by supporting more truth of the Torah, by warning people about falsehood, about heretics, by sharing more lectures, by supporting more real kiruv, by supporting the Batei Midrashim, the kollels, by taking initiative that we actually care for the Torah, because this is what makes us a nation. After the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, the Me'am Lo'ez says that Plato, the leader among the philosophers in the world, some say it was Aristotle, came to see the destruction. And there he saw Jeremiah the prophet crying. And asked him, why are you crying over broken stones? Don't you know we don't cry over such things? Build again. Jeremiah told him, you won't understand. You don't have knowledge of the secret of tears, which is something that even a Jewish boy knows. Of course, the philosopher was taken back and said, what are you talking about? Just stones. Jeremiah told him, I'm sure that in your philosophical world you have many questions that you don't have answers for. Ask all of them, and I'll answer them right now. Of course, he said that I have many questions, but I don't think that any human being on earth can ever answer them. But if you may, he asked them the questions, and in a moment, Jeremiah answered them completely in a way that made the philosopher believe that Jeremiah was not a human being, but rather an angel. And thereby he said, now my difficulty with you is even more. Initially I said, why are you crying? Build again. Now that I see that you're the smartest person, angel that exists in the world, it's even more baffling that you're crying. He says, you may be satisfied with the answers that I gave you for all of your complications. But what you don't understand is that those things that you call stones are the only reasons why I have this wisdom. Because once the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, there are no more chidushim. There are no more new insights. Everything that we have today in the world of Torah is a clarification and an elaboration of what was already stated at the time of the Bet HaMikdash. There's nothing new under the sun. The door from heaven was closed with the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. The wisdom that Am Yisrael nourished from the time of the Bet HaMikdash, from having the Shekhinah reside in it, is unexplainable. The fear of heaven that Am Yisrael nourished from it is unexplainable. But we'll try to explain it. Where the sages teach us that after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, the Romans, despite killing, murdering, doing everything that could possibly be horrible, were still scared to enter the Bet HaMikdash. They tried getting some of the prisoners to go in, but no one would agree. But then there was one Rasha The Gemara says his name was Yosef Meshita, one wicked Jew. And they told him, you go in, get us something, and you'll keep it. Whatever you get in there, you can keep it. They wanted him to go in first. If he can get in, that means we're allowed to go in. Yosef Meshita went inside and got the menorah. At least one of them. There were replicas as well. When he brought it out, the Romans said, no. This is too much for you to get, for such a person like you. Go back inside and get something else. The truth is that even though he went inside once, they were still scared to go in. They wanted to see if he could go again. It wasn't necessarily so much about the menorah, but rather because they wanted to see it again, because they were scared to go in. But all of a sudden, Yosef Meshita's face changes and he says, I will not go inside. They said, go inside and we'll give you even more money. And he said, I'm not going inside. He said, if you don't go inside, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to torture you. He says, I'm not going inside. And then these evil Romans put him on a table of a woodmaker and started sawing at his different body parts, trying to convince him to go back inside. And throughout that time, the Gemara says, this Yosef Meshita that was a Rasha, all of a sudden turns into a tzaddik that's willing to sacrifice his life to die on Kiddush Hashem, saying, woe to me that I angered my God once. I will not do it again. Woe to me that I angered my God once. I will not do it again. And each time they cut a body part, he continues to scream in agonizing pain the same statement over and over, refusing to go back inside. While the Romans and forefathers of Amalek are killing him and eventually kill him, Yosef Meshita dies on Kiddush Hashem. And after his neshama leaves his body, a voice comes out from heaven and says, welcome Yosef Meshita to Olam Haba. Now of course the Baalei Musar were baffled by this. How is it possible that Yosef Meshita, that was a Rasha, all of a sudden, in 1 second he's willing to go into the Bet HaMikdash and steal one of the holy vessels from the Bet HaMikdash, but the next moment he's willing to die in Kiddush Hashem? What happened? The Rabbi Ponovich says, as soon as anyone entered the Bet HaMikdash, the Shekhinah affected them. When Yosef Meshita entered the Bet HaMikdash, the presence of the Shekhinah affected his neshama, melting his heart to do complete Teshuva, to the point where he is willing to accept all suffering with love and to die on Kiddush Hashem, just by simply entering the Bet HaMikdash. And while others will say, wait, but don't we already have the teachings where it says that the Shekhinah left the Bet HaMikdash in order to allow the enemy to destroy it? Yes, the Shekhinah did leave the Bet HaMikdash. As a result of all of the heretics that were allowed to enter the Bet HaMikdash before the destruction, when the heretics were given permission to teach the public that God needs you, and God this, and needs that, and all types of things, eventually, in order to put the nail on the coffin in any connection to Hashem, they brought their immorality to the Bet HaMikdash itself. And when these heretics were permitted to go into the Bet HaMikdash and commit all types of heinous, immoral crimes in it, the Shekhinah left. And this allowed a dome to destroy the Bet HaMikdash. So how is it that when Yosef Meshita entered, the Shekhinah affected him? That's because Chachamim say that even though the Shekhinah left and allowed the enemies to destroy the Bet HaMikdash, it went back inside in order to show us that Hashem will punish us, but never leave us. And where do we learn that from? The Gemara in Masechet Yomah says that when the enemies came into the Kodesh Kodashim, like we said earlier, the Moabites and Ammonites, they saw the cherubs looking at each other. And the Gemara says that there were two versions, two things that the cherubs would do. If Am Yisrael is judged favorably, then the cherubs will be looking at each other, and all of Am Yisrael was allowed to see them during Yom Kippur. But if Am Yisrael is being judged unfavorably because of wickedness, then the cherubs will be looking away. As we discussed in our Jewish intimacy series about the cherubs had literally a life in them. They were angels, they were not just statues. And were used as one of the ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would connect to his holy nation. And Am Yisrael would know exactly where they stood on Yom Kippur, whether the cherubs looked at each other or they were looking away. So when the enemies came in and they saw and had the cherubs looking at each other, that was HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling us, I hurt you, I destroyed my house, but I will never leave you. And the only reason why I'm not allowing you to have the Bet HaMikdash again, the third and final Bet HaMikdash, is because those same criminals, those same heretics that told you all types of Lashon Hara about me, that I need things, that I have limitations, that I have human form, all types of other heretical statements are still welcome among your communities. So long as you do not protest against the heretics, you will not have a Bet HaMikdash. This, Rabotai, is what Sinat Chinam is. It's baseless hatred of ourselves, not just each other. Because each and every single one of us can do something to support the Torah, the truth of the Torah. Whether it's warning people about heretics that have clearly been exposed as heretics because they say things that are against the tradition, against the Masoret, or it's supporting more Torah that's simply sharing the truth, sharing the real lectures, sharing the lectures that will actually help Am Yisrael do tshuva. Whether it's financially or simply by using your time and clicking a share button. There are many ways that you can help Am Yisrael, in fact, help yourself deserve the Bet HaMikdash to be rebuilt. The heretics are the reason why we lost the Bet HaMikdash. Following the heretics and being silent while the heretics are spewing their venom to the people is why we don't have a Bet HaMikdash. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will all take initiative this Tisha B'Av to make this year a year we fight against the heretics in every way, shape possible. No violence, only words of the Torah, publicizing the Torah, creating lectures in our communities of real Torah, disinviting heretics, speaking against heretics, warning people against the heretics, and making sure that our ears only hear the words of the true Torah and nothing else. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will succeed to publicize enough truth of the Torah that it'll destroy all the heretics from being among us ever again. And we will merit to celebrate Tisha B'Av with the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. Kol Tuv, and Bezat Hashem, we will all succeed in serving Hashem and bring in the ultimate salvation.